Welcome to the InStory show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host. Our theme is how do you come out of hiding and dare to be seen for who you really are by saying yes to your soul and telling your story. So today I am thrilled to welcome Amber Duggar. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Devorah. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. We've already had such a fun start to our before we recorded conversation. But let me read a little bit about Amber and then we will dive in. Amber Duggar is the founder of Profit for Keeps, a system developed online for online entrepreneurs to end the stress and anxiety around numbers. It is a holistic system combining personal finance and business cash flow strategies using profit first, and you need a budget. She has helped hundreds of coaches implement this system and has helped thousands more calculate revenue goals that actually make sense. She's a certified health coach from and works in corporate finance and worked in corporate finance for 15 years before venturing out on her own in 2015. She thrives on being location independent. She loves traveling, wine, bicycles, knitting, and a good cup of tea if in England and coffee if in Italy. Sweet Life Purposeful Money is a high vibe community of virtual service based entrepreneurs seeking a group to up level their money game. And I can tell you it's so much more than that. So, all right, but Amber, just like I make everybody start by telling me, what does saying yes to your soul mean to you?
I love this question, Devorah, and it really is something that I think I struggled with for a long time, and I wouldn't have even known how to answer this even probably 10 years ago. But I would say that saying yes to my soul is when it may not necessarily make sense in my head. So it's listening to my heart, not my head, and really being certain that in my heart it feels I'm at peace. And when I'm at peace, then I know it's my soul talking, regardless of how crazy or convoluted it may seem in my head.
I want you to say that again. When you say that again about feeling at peace, when you what? Say it again, because I think that's super important because sometimes we don't know how to know.
Yeah. So what I do is it's really about feeling at peace. So we can feel at peace and still get in our head and start to worry and start to go into fear. But when we can sit and be quiet and really go within and ask ourselves, am I at peace here in the heart? And I'm pointing to my heart for those that are listening and not watching. It's that is the most important for me when I'm listening to my soul. And our brain is incredible. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of our body that allows us to analyze and make plans and communicate effectively and directly and quickly. And it also is absolutely responding at a slower rate than our heart. Our heart does have heart intelligence, and there have been these incredible, studies that show that the heart actually knows before the brain. And so I love really honoring my heart and knowing that when I feel at peace there, regardless of what I'm thinking, if I feel peace there, then it's a yes. And that's taken time to cultivate, but it's the one thing that I would absolutely recommend to anyone who's feeling a little bit uncertain or not sure what the next step is just start having that relationship with your heart, and you'll find that she is a very, very wise part of your being.
So beautiful. I love that. And now I would love for you to tell us a little bit of your story that I like to call how you got from there to here, since I know that's not how you have always run your life.
No, absolutely not. My former self is going, "Yep, Amber, I wish I had known that earlier." I grew up in a very pragmatic household. I grew up in a small town in New Mexico called Los Alamos, New Mexico. And I think people are more familiar with it now that the movie Manhattan came out. But my grandparents actually met during World War II, and they were friends with Oppenheimer. So we have lots of pictures and all sorts of stories. And so growing up in Los Alamos, it was mostly scientists. And I grew up with an encyclopedia behind us. And my father has a degree in theoretical physics. And it was very pragmatic, like I said. It wasn't until I was in corporate, I was in finance. It was the pragmatic degree to obtain that allowed me to make good money. And I was In various uh, places in finance. I was in a nonprofit, was in the third largest nonprofit in the country, helping other nonprofits receive corporate donations. I was their corporate or their controller, is what they called it. So we were handling all of the finances for that. I moved into government contracting and I worked both as a contractor and also within the State Department and did everything from pricing to budget control to meeting with government officials and explaining the budgets and the pricing and what we were going to be doing. But I was in that environment in outside of Washington, D.C., and I continued to feel this exhaustion. It was an intense exhaustion, no matter how much sleep I got, no matter how much I worked out or did things that were, and that's really why I first got into health, because I was just wanting to feel better. And I was in a cubicle. I remember eating pizza off the cubicle desk at 2 in the morning, knowing that I was going to be back there at 8 the next day or that later that morning. And it just, something had to give. And I was scrolling on Instagram, actually. This was back in 2013 when Instagram was just getting started. And I had a friend, I was really into knitting. I had a knitting community that I ran, and I just loved being with people that loved fiber. And it didn't matter if you were displaced, didn't have a home, or if you were a doctor. We were all encouraged to meet together, and we had people from all different backgrounds. But in that knitting community, I really got to experience a lot of different lifestyles and a lot of different choices that we can make. And so one of them that was there, she had just finished her master's in library sciences, and she was actually working at Library of Congress, which she thought was her dream job. And she was posting a picture of a kettlebell. And Instagram in my mind back then was Knitstagram. I mean, all I saw was knitting. So here was this kettlebell, very out of place. I said, "What is this thing? Why are you posting a kettlebell? Where's your knitting?" And I read the description, and I remember thinking back later in my life that I was actually a bit embarrassed that I had this reaction, but it was a true, authentic reaction, which was jealousy and envy, because she was describing, I've decided I am so passionate about health and getting back into my body. I'm leaving my job that I just received. I've become certified as a personal trainer. My husband is fully behind me, and I am going to pursue my dream.
Wow.
And I remember sitting there thinking all these things like, isn't she lucky she has a husband who can do that for her? And like all the things that I now would absolutely not be thinking, but at the same time, those were my thoughts. And I was jealous. And I also was activated
Mhm.
a few hours later, because this was in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve of
Oh, wow.
2013. So at 4 in the morning, I had $500 that I had set aside. I was using YNAB at the time, which is an envelope system. For those of you that are wondering, what is you need a budget? It's just an envelope system. So I had $500 sitting there for a contribution to something. I don't remember what it was. And I looked up the NASM certification, and it was $500 at the time. And that is for personal training. And I loved personal training. My husband had left his corporate career and was a personal trainer. So I thought, well, I mean, he wasn't my husband at the time. So I decided I am going to start studying for this. So I bought the book, and I remember thinking $500, like, I better be committed to this. This is a lot of money. And so I started to do that, and I started incorporating other things to really make my life better. I was riding my bicycle to work, and I was actually thinking of moving to Portland because I thought, I want to live in a place where I can actually ride my bike and not worry about getting hit by a car, you know? And I would take a bus to take it to a particular path so I could feel free every morning. I got a community garden so I could feel the earth in my fingers. I was living and embodying what I craved, which was very different than the life I was living in corporate. And almost 6 months went by, and I wasn't studying for that exam. I was realizing that is not really what I want to do. I don't think I want to be in another building and having to be with clients all day. Said I love working out, but I don't think I want to do it all day and then not actually work out myself. So I had just purchased this new bike. It was from Rivendell Bicycle Works, and I had saved up a lot of money for this bike. It was enough to actually get a car. And I was riding at home on one of the first days that I had it. And this was a month before I was meant to take this exam, the NASM exam. And I was riding my bike home and it was making a really strange noise. And I was really frustrated with it. And that morning before leaving, my my now husband said to me, Amber, I really think that a gratitude practice would really serve you well. And I remember thinking, I don't have anything to write down. Yeah, that's how immersed I was in this feeling of just really not being happy with my life. And so he said, Amber, you have a bed, write that down. You have water, write that down. And I remember thinking, this is so fake. Of course I have water. Of course I have a bed. It was so presumptuous. So I wrote them down. But the third thing I wrote was, I'm grateful I get to ride my bike to work today. And so I am riding this bike. It's making a weird noise. I'm going down this street, and it's called Tapawingo Drive. And it's this very steep hill in Vienna, Virginia. And it was making this clanking noise, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was getting more and more frustrated because I was thinking to myself, I just spent all this money, and even my bike doesn't work. And the whole front part of the bike, the brake system, it was a cantilever brake system, had come off of the front of the fork and went down onto the wheel of the bike. And it clamped down so hard because it was so fast. I was going 19 miles an hour that it clamped down on the front. It bent the steel fork completely back, and I was launched off of the bike. And I proceeded to watch the asphalt come closer and closer to my face until it stopped an inch before my eyes. And I watched the pavement as I slid on the pavement, and I had 99% of the impact on my head. The bike landed on top of me, and everything was incredibly silent. People started coming out to see if I was okay. And all I could think was, I'm alive. I have my teeth. I moved to this side, so I just had, a mark here. I said, even if I'm disformed, I have my life. I'm alive. I can eat, I can chew, I can sip. I was thinking these things immediately while I was not even off of the pavement. And I get up, and so many people came around to help. And after 30 x-rays and 2 different head scans, I had no broken bones. They didn't think I had anything wrong with my head. I didn't have any bleeding in the brain. And they said, you can go home. Well, the next day I went right back into work mode. And I had 2 proposals to do. My mother was there wanting to make sure I was okay. And I looked like Jekyll and Hyde. One side, my face looked normal. The other side was so swollen and inflamed that you couldn't recognize me. And it was in that moment that I realized I have so much to be grateful for. And it just started this entire new chapter of my life. And I always share, it doesn't need to be this huge traumatic thing. It needed to be for me because I am extremely stubborn. And I also believe I'm here to share that when you start feeling all these signs and you're feeling this tug to do something different, it's really listening to your heart and asking, are we meant to respond to this? And so that is what really started a whole new chapter. And I went into health coaching and moved to Bali, and I started my business, and then moved eventually into what I do now, which is money coaching. But that is really how I got from one place to the other. I'm skipping over some steps because it would be too long. We'd be here for 2 hours.
I know, but what I think is so important is that we all have different stories, and our stories pave the way for others. And when we hear the story of you being launched off your bike in a traumatic accident that you survived amazingly, those of you listening, don't wait till you need to get launched off your bike. in an accident. Like there are plenty of people who have an I almost died story of some sort. And I get people who come to me and they say, but I don't have one of those. I'm like, so that's good. Be thankful. But the trick is part of the goal of summits like this and telling our stories is if you are watching and you are getting those signs that you figure out how to say yes to the change of direction, to the learning, to whatever's calling you before you have to get whapped up the side of the head, literally. Like,
Exactly. And it can be just the trauma of the life you have right now, all the things that aren't feeling aligned for you. You can have post-traumatic growth through just recognizing that how the life that you've been living doesn't align with what you want to do going forward, and that all of that has taught you so many things to allow you the perspective to step into who you are. And that doesn't, and who you are can look 1,000 different ways with how you're doing it. But
right.
who we are will always be that. And that's what I find so fascinating is we can do so many different things, but as long as we stay true to who we are, it will be aligned and things will move in the way that it's meant to.
Right. I mean, I often say you don't have to immediately quit your job if you have one to start honoring the calling of your soul and your spirituality and your creativity, but being able to join with somebody on a series like this who they just light you up. Because just not sitting alone with this makes a big difference.
Huge.
It makes a huge difference. We need to find each other. It's part of why I love telesummits is because that's how we find each other. Like, who knew? Amber and I had so much fun talking. We thought we better start recording, right? So, who do you resonate with? Then get their free gift. Click the link. Reach out because you have something you need to say, and maybe you need Amber, or maybe you need me, or someone else on this series. But just don't sit around alone at home till you get whacked, okay? Because it's not helpful. Let this be your nudge, and it's much more gentle, So, all right, I want you to sort of launch us forward into some of your thinking. We talked a little bit about sort of how you have this duality, like you put things that together that don't seem to go together. So I would love to hear a little bit about like how you took your whole brainiac money side of you and then opened up this whole expanded spiritual consciousness side and why they go together. Like they don't go together for most people. Just saying.
I would agree. I definitely never saw myself doing what I'm doing now. After the accident and after really recovering from that accident, I was very fortunate to be able to go to that health coaching school. I graduated from it. I had clients. I was thinking, okay, I need to get out of here. I can't be in this space anymore. And I was listening to podcasts back in
In which space do you mean?
in DC. I was in DC,
Oh,
even
you were
though I
still
had
in.
left the corporate world, and it was very clear signs that were telling me this is the next step for me. So I just knew I was at a Cava Grill. If you've ever been to one of those, it's this Mediterranean Chipotle, basically. And I was sitting there, and I was watching all the people in line for lunch wearing their corporate badges, and it was extremely triggering for me because I thought, oh my gosh, I am so crazy. Why did I leave this job that was paying me all this money? And they are all the smart people keeping
Ah,
their job. So I decided I needed to be surrounded by people who actually supported this idea of doing things differently. And I was listening to this podcast interview of now one of my very dear friends. She's from London. And she was on this interview about how she was also feeling like she was floundering after leaving corporate. She used that word, and I've always kept it because I just think it's such a good word. And she had been working at IBM in London, and she was now a health coach, and she was doing her blogging, and she found this community in Bali, and it was called Tribe Wanted. Just the name already, I'm like, I need a tribe. I need a tribe of people who aren't telling me, Amber, you are crazy. What are you doing? Because my family and my friends all thought, what are you doing? And except for my husband, he was very supportive. And I would say my mother too. So we ended up, I looked into it, and this community was in Bali, in Ubud, which was on the other side of the world, literally from DC. And what they would do is they spent 50% focusing on the business and 25% helping each other, and then 25% exploring the island of their time. And I thought, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go for 8 weeks. And I had a friend who had points, so I was able to get a really good ticket. And I decided just to go. And when I was there, I was at first so scared of being there, but at the same time, it just felt right. And I found a place to stay. I started to make friends, and then I realized 8 weeks is nothing. I need to stay here longer. So I extended it to about 6 months. And during that time, I was being asked over and over again, because my Skillshare, I didn't need to do health coaching because everyone there was into health. They wanted to know, what was I doing around money that wasn't stressing me out every second? And I had developed what I thought was something that was needed for me to feel safe. And I had always, I had a degree in finance, so I was looking at all of it from that perspective, but also the advice I was getting from my health coaching institute and my business coach. There was two things that I knew just didn't make sense. One, the business coach was saying, let's start you at 5K as a revenue goal. I live in DC. DC is not gonna, even back then, 5K was not gonna, not gonna get me there. I said, I really need like 8K. And she said, well, Amber, let's be realistic. And I remember thinking, and I know that she absolutely had the best intentions. She wanted me to succeed. But I also knew that if I was making 5K and I needed 8K, that in 1 year I was going to be in $33,000 in debt. And the other thing was the Health Coaching Institute was suggesting a rate of $199 a month for a client to see weekly. So I did the math. I was like, I am going to be so exhausted. And first of all, I have to find all these clients. And then second of all, I'm going to be exhausted. And then third, I'm going to be in debt. That doesn't make sense to me. So I just made some tweaks and I made a calculator that allowed me to see how much do I actually need to make and what do I need to be able to do to make that. So I also figured out the pricing and how much time do I actually want to be on calls. And that was how I started to do the process. And so I was being asked to share this and to teach this and to go into women's retreats and talk about the holistic side, because after going through coaching certification, the main thing I learned was how to listen, how to hold space. And so all of that kind of fell in my lap. And it wasn't until about a year later that I was helping a family member at the time with their own finances. They were going through a hardship. And it was life-changing for them. And it was actually in this house because I bought this house from her. And it was in this room even. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was in this room. I came back and I was doing my call with my business coach. And I went back out to the kitchen and I said, my business coach is so insistent that I do this cash flow thing, but I don't want to touch money again with a 10-foot pole. It's so egotistical and there's just so much complexity when it doesn't need to be. And I don't want to be in that world. And she yelled at me in the kitchen and it was a shock. And she said, and she had never yelled at me before. And she said, Amber, it is your responsibility. I have never felt so safe with my finances. And I really listened to that. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go all in. And several years later, I was treating my family member to a vacation in Mexico. I surprised her. I got her first class tickets and we were on the beach and we were at this beautiful resort and we were having a margarita. And she looked over at me holding her margarita. She said, aren't you glad I yelled at you that day in the kitchen? So it definitely wasn't something I planned on doing, but I saw that there really needed to be this space of, we don't need more bookkeeping, accountants, all of that is looking backwards. Individuals that are called to doing something that reaches their soul, they're visionary. We all have these ideas of ways that we want to help humanity. And the only way to do that is by looking now and into the future and reverse engineering that and being able to bring in the practical, but also remain open to what is going to be brought into our field. And I think that the bicycle accident is really what started to open me up to more of these spiritual gifts, because I was really wanting to heal my brain. And transcendental meditation was, they have a lot of research on how it heals different parts of the body. So I became trained in that so I could do that. And my husband and I have done it twice a day since. And that, I believe, really opened me to settling my nervous system enough to be open to what comes in, because we all have that ability. I think we're just mostly very much in our heads most of the time. And so it's too loud and we can't hear that quiet voice.
Mhm. So this has led you to like a whole side of expanded consciousness also, right? Like you acknowledge you have high level skills in money and you started to help people with those, but you only seems like you could only do that because they were inside of this more higher consciousness reality that you had also cultivated, right?
You mean my clients or?
No, you had cultivated a higher consciousness spiritually for yourself, which allowed you to do money inside of a higher consciousness as opposed to in the way it had been done before, right? You said, I'm never going back into money. And then your friend yelled at you or your family member. But I feel like you only were able to do it because you had to lift the whole thing up into a place of higher consciousness. That's what it sounds like, as opposed to being stuck, like the money, like you talked about money being kind of neutral or the energy around it, where it was in a negative place for you for a long time.
I would say it was in more of a neutral place, but I had a fear of not having enough
Mhm,
because I was taught that if you were in debt, you were a bad person. And
mhm,
I don't speak much about my money paradigm or story because it doesn't resonate with most people, because I think most people didn't have this experience from my experience of talking with a lot of people. But I grew up being taught how to save 50% of, even when I was 6. I remember buying my first Fisher Price shoes or roller skates, the red and yellow ones, from saving 50 cents a week for weeks and weeks and weeks to be able to pay for half of it. And so I always thought of it as this resource to be used and saved, but I also felt that it was so rigid that I was scared of disappointing my parents, scared of being viewed as, inadequate in that area. And it wasn't until I stepped into understanding more about wealth consciousness that I think that I realized that there's much more to it than just the practical,
mhm,
that it is this energy that wants to move and is a conduit of our intentions. And I remember being quite annoyed with my business coach who started the whole first month on wealth consciousness. And I thought, can you show us how to make money, please? Because I want to pay my mortgage. But it was being in the world of individuals who I think just think in the land of possibility much more so than the fear of running out of money. And I was definitely in that state of fear. And it was being around those that led me into this consciousness of, and it's been a 10-year journey, really, to be in the place I am now, to understand that it actually is something that we are all divinely supported. And it's not something that I think someone that has not gone through some of these experiences can maybe necessarily resonate with right away. But it's the seeds that were planted for me that has allowed me to now really feel it for the first time, really embrace it and recognize that we are on a good trajectory. And I needed to wait until I really felt that, because transparency and honesty are so important to me. And I
mhm,
didn't feel it for a long time. So I used the system that I created to feel more comfortable. And now I see it more as a tool of settling the nervous system to open our gateway to this higher consciousness, to allow us to feel what it really is.
mhm. I really love the fact that you have these two worlds coming together where you have really detailed work around finances and you can tell us about your free gift, but it's inside of the work you've done to raise your consciousness, to feel that divine spiritual support. And I think it allows people from both directions to come and bring that together. Like we're not in this either or all or nothing time in our consciousness in our lives right now. And what you said about finding your tribe is really powerful. About opening up to these higher realms is important. And then that you can skill up in an area like just practical money at the same time. And so I would love for you to tell us, what is your free gift and how is it helpful to people so that they can kind of get a start in this world that you have opened up?
Well, I'm so honored to be in a position to share this because I do think that this is the one thing I wish I had when I first started. And it's something that anyone listening, you can all use it right now just to start getting an idea and start thinking to yourself, maybe I can do this. Maybe this is possible. And it's reverse engineering your revenue goal. So a lot of times I noticed that when I would work with clients who just recently left corporate, let's say that they were making $4,000 a month after taxes that they were receiving into their bank account. So their goal is usually aligned around there. Well, I need to at least make enough to pay my bills. And I know that I do well with at least 4,000. But the thing that we all, I think, don't necessarily think about is, well, the business does require additional expenses. We also need money for when we have variable months, because almost all of us will have up and down months. And then we also need to make sure that we're paying our taxes and have money to pay our taxes. And instead of having that thought of, well, I'm just going to put everything through my business so I never pay any tax, instead, I really encourage my clients to say, imagine having a business where you're happily paying your taxes because you are really making such a deep impact. So our revenue is directly tied to our impact. And that doesn't mean that you want to do everything for free, or that you want to, charge a ton of money and think that that's okay. It's really more about what's aligned for the impact of the person and how they perceive it. And so this revenue goal can help you with that first step. And so this gift allows you to put in how much you want to actually receive in your bank account. And then it also allows you to put in however much you think you're going to need for business expenses, like your scheduling, or maybe it's your bookkeeper, or some tools that might allow you to be online, or however you want to run your business. And then also have enough money for taxes and still have money left over so you can start to create a buffer for yourself for those variable months. So it's a revenue goal calculator, and I'm very honored to offer it to everyone listening.
Well, I love that that's your offer. It's just such an important practical tool for those who want to follow the calling of your soul. You don't have to sell your soul to deal with the money part. You get to honor your soul calling. And I really, really love that so much. All right, well, we're almost out of time. So leave us with a couple of last thoughts before we wrap up.
Well, I'm speaking from a place of love for anyone listening. If you feel this call, if something is sparked inside of you, I encourage you to first honor the courage that you took to listen to this particular interview. Because a lot of times people will see money or profit or, oh, I think I'll skip that one. Thanks. I don't need to listen to that one. So if you are listening at this point, you have an incredible amount of courage, and you also are truly in this space of the next step is so, so beautiful, and it's possible for you. So I encourage you to take the revenue goal calculator, calculate your goal, and then it's like ripping the Band-Aid off a little bit. It may shock you a little bit. So I also encourage you to have space after that to either go for a walk in nature, or take an Epsom salt bath, or put on your favorite music if you love dancing, something that allows your body to get into this state of reception and allowing you to just feel into it. Because what happens is that then, after you've gone through that and you've given yourself the gift of the knowledge, because awareness is key, you then will start getting these incredible ideas. Well, what if this happened? Or what if I did that? And it allows you to start thinking in a different way. So that's the first thing I would suggest. The second thing is, I was told this, and I think it made a huge difference for me when I was first getting started. And I did this method, and it was find 5 to 10 people who are doing what you would like to do, or that are in your field, that are at least 3 years in business, that have made it through at least 3 years in business, and ask for 10 minutes of their time to ask what they wish they had learned or wish they had known about when they first got started. And what I learned from that when I did this, and by the way, you can do some handwritten thank you notes after, they love it. And then you end up having really great, amazing people in your network before you even really get started. And one of the things I learned was, don't worry so much about the website. Don't worry about everything looking perfect. We were just talking about it earlier, Devorah, about, it's not about perfection. And allow yourself to have two things in place. Have a way for people to schedule time to talk with you, and have a very easy way for them to pay you. And those two pieces will be what starts your business and allows you to actually be in a place where you have cash flow coming in. And talk to 3 people every day about what you want to do and speak from a place of possibility. And it's amazing what comes in. And I want to thank you for that courage for listening to this. And I see you, I believe in you, and I know you are absolutely on the right path to do what you're meant to do.
Beautiful. So we have a little Facebook group for the show. Please pop in there. Amber can pop in there. Get the calculator, do the work, and then take a step. Take some of the steps Amber said. Take a step to connect so that you don't sit all by yourself, because we are here and we do make a difference for each other. And as soon as someone does that for you, you are going to turn around and do it for the next person. So thank you so much, Amber. And as I always say in farewell, remember to go out in the world and share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Bye,
Mm.
folks.
Bye.